Of Liftport Group, and we've been running these podcasts for about 3 months now, so pretty happy about that. That's kind of a new thing for us. The short version is we were part of the NASA research team working on the space elevator over 20 years ago. I get to say that because we just hit a milestone, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. Over that time, we've had some successes and failures along the way. We worked on robots and nanotechnology. We moved away from working on the Earth elevator and shifted focus to work on the lunar elevator about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago. During the pandemic, we shifted again. We're still working on the elevator, and I hope to have some news about that later this year. But during the pandemic, just to keep the lights on, we shifted to doing a lot of media stuff. So we hosted 27 online conferences and one hybrid conference. Through that, we have a couple hundred hours of YouTube content, and we got pretty good at interviewing really interesting guests. So now our next pivot is to build out podcasts, both our own shows and podcasts as a service for other organizations. So we're working with the Mars Society on theirs and some other stuff coming up soon. And with that, I'm gonna start chatting with our guest. For those that are new, we have a Discord channel that is somewhat quiet, but there's a lot of activity in the news section. We spend a lot of time showcasing news, and most of our stuff can be found on our YouTube channel. No surprise, youtube.com/liftport. And one of the things that we're working on now is really build a knowledge base around that intersection of money and space and policy and commercialization. You know, what's that nexus look like? And with that in mind, we're building out a conference series, an online conference series, quarterly. The first one's coming up March 28th and 29th, 29th and 30th. I got that wrong. And we really hope that folks will join us for that. That should be pretty fascinating. We're going to bring in angels and VCs at different levels. We're bringing in sovereign wealth funds and private equity folks. We're bringing in crowd equity and home office money, big money, to talk about what this industry, this $500 billion industry looks like and where it's going. So it should be a lot of fun, should be really interesting. And over the next few months, we'll be interviewing those folks on a one-on-one basis on the show. And with that, thanks very much, everybody. I'm going to turn this show over to Sean Mahoney. I've known Sean mostly off, not on, for about 5 years. We're a part of the Space Frontier Foundation. I have been involved with the Space Frontier Foundation since probably 2002 or 2003. I distinctly remember going to an event in 3 and 4. There's a lot of old stories about the old foundation that's pretty fun. I became an advocate. We'll talk about that in a minute. I became an advocate. I was supposed to be an advocate back in 2007 or 8, but those are the years that everything cratered for me. So I did not go and did not get my pin. So he has a cool pin that I don't have right now. I did become.
You have it. You just aren't wearing it.
Yes, exactly. I did become an advocate back in 2017 or 18 when I restarted Liftport Group to focus on the lunar elevators. So I count Most people in the commercial space sector really come from two family trees, if you will. One would be Rick Tomlinson, and the other one would be Peter Diamandis. I would argue that there's a new branch of that tree coming in from Musk, but that's a whole nother story. But folks that have been here for 15 or 20 years, they can usually trace their lineage to two. I'm fortunate that I can trace to both of those leaders, so I'm pretty happy about that. All right, enough about me and my history. Let's start talking to Sean. Sean, introduce yourself for a minute. We're going to go in and jump in to start asking some questions, but share a little bit about your background, who you are, where you're coming from.
The people part. So I've described myself as an accidental space guy. Unlike so many of the folks in this industry, I stumbled into it. It was other attributes of the industry that drew me in. When I was really interested in the fact that this space domain was starting to cross some barriers from being closely held by a small number of people to a much wider audience. And that's a theme that I had prior to my space career. I spent over a decade with the good folks at Maston Space Systems, and learned, and then had to unlearn, and then learn a few more things. So it took a while for me to get my my head around all the different parts that are going on here in the space industry. And one of the best helps for me was the folks in the Space Frontier Foundation. So when I was asked to help out, I was eager to lend my background and my framing to the board. Served on the board for several years, got busy working on going to the moon, and then this past year I've been advising a couple of the other board members, and they said, "Hey, do you want to come back? Hey, do you want to serve as chair?" So, sure, love to. So that was what brought me back to the Space Frontier Foundation, and I'm excited to be working with the organization again, and to have a few new tools. A lot of great stuff had happened even in that short period of time when I was otherwise engaged for a while.
You've been involved with the foundation for how long?
I'm going to say 2016-ish, I think, was when I got involved, not just attending, but involved in helping the organization overall. And it's, it was, I think, within that first year, the New Space Conference was one of the ones that really resonated with me. I had stories of kind of getting dismissed or blown off by some larger, people that worked at large companies and had a lot of importance about themselves when I said I was working for this company called Maston, and to then find a home in the space community in the Space Frontier Foundation was great. It was others who were struggling to get things done, not just think about it,
right,
not just complain about it, but the actual doing of advancing the industry and accelerating the human settlement of space.
Yeah, there are a lot of terrific space organizations in the world, right? You can point to I talked a moment ago about Tomlinson. He's got a great character voice, and he'll do this line about the Saganites with the Planetary Society, and von Braunians with the National Space Society, and then there's the wild cards at the Space Frontier Foundation, the O'Neillians, right?
Yeah.
They're all trying to do this big crazy work of moving humanity out into space. That's our calling. That's what we're doing. It's not easy, but and the foundation has really changed a lot since the earliest days.
If you read Laurie Garver's book recently. She talks about the space pirates, and to a not insignificant degree, those space pirates are the people that are there it is, escaping gravity. Those space pirates found their home here in the Space Frontier Foundation. This was an organization that saw the future, and not just from a technological standpoint. It was not just about, oh, well, we need this tech or we need this money. It was about what is the framework that is going to be necessary for humans to settle off this planet. And, you know, whether or not Elon wants to say that, you know, he is of the O'Neillian space frontier tree or not, the fact is that the work that the foundation did laid the groundwork, cracked open our national space policy that enabled there to be fertile ground for all of these companies. And I got to be honest with you, there's still stories about some of the things that went on back in those days that I'm still uncovering and I'm still encountering, which is great. I know very much we stand on the shoulders, and the work that the foundation has done has really helped move the ball forward. The foundation is about settlement of space by non-government means. And it doesn't mean government can't be involved or there shouldn't be governments. The idea is that it needs the power of a commercial enterprise of actual profit and generating value from space, not just flags and footprints sort of thing. And so a lot of folks know the foundation as the people who kind of really pushed for commercial space, which is true.
Right. Yep.
That is because that was the largest impediment to this future of human settlement of space. And so to a certain degree, and I think there was even a Space News article or something that said, you know, the war is won. There's still an awful lot. We are not yet, to my knowledge, we do not have human settlement of space yet.
Right. Nope.
And there's still an awful lot of good work to be done. And so what we're doing right now with the board and the advocates and, you know, folks who are seeing this and want to offer some thoughts, we're looking at what does that landscape look like? What are the thresholds? What are the accomplishments, the gates? What are the things we have to, you know, levels we have to keep below in order for us to keep advancing towards this future human settlement of space? And the framework that I use is, I refer to it as the inevitability framework.
Okay.
There's some that go to environmental framework or commercial framework or manifest destiny or whatever else. I see humanity is going to settle space eventually, or we're going to die. And if we're going to be dead, then that doesn't matter. So assuming we survive, that it will happen eventually. And when that happens, we will be creating value here on the planet, just like we do with the space industry now. But that settlement of space will be creating value for humans, period.
Right.
And improving the standards of living. And so wouldn't it be great to pull that thing closer to today? And if the work that we can do helps human settlement happen 5 years earlier, then that difference in improvement in the human condition that we're able to capture, we can say, yeah, we're not the ones who are going to do all the settling. It's not like there's going to be a space frontier flag, although, you know, if someone wants to carry one, fine. But it's not like the organization is not doing it, but it's accelerating it, pulling that bright, shiny future a little bit closer to today.
I love that. That's kind of why I got into this in the first place. You know, I've been at this for 20 years and my mom still doesn't know what I do for a living. right. Like I just can't really articulate that in a way that comes across. Um, I want to recognize Dr. Tompkins. He's in the chat here, and I'll reference some of his comments here in a minute, Daniel. So just kind of bear with me. But he's saying that getting out there is hard, and I've had conversation with Tompkins. He's been on our shows before. And getting out there is really hard, but I mean it's pretty important. Before we go too far down the Space Frontier Foundation rabbit hole, I want to come back to your own history, your own background. I'm going to tell all of our viewers and listeners that we're going to do this in two parts. That we're going to skip the Maston side of the story on this episode. You can share what you want, but then we'll have another episode in about 2 weeks or 3 weeks to bring you on for that. But let's talk about your background some. Education, where'd you grow up? How did you get here in the first place? You said you were lucky to find the foundation, but how did you get into space in the first place? Give us that part too.
Just showing up.
Yeah.
7:30 a.m. Monday morning. How I got into this was, my upbringing and my life had led me to a point where I graduated from business school. I knew I did not want to go back into a cube. I knew that I needed to be more in the entrepreneurial and small business part of the world. And so I started spending my time here in Atlanta. That center back then was around Georgia Tech. They had an entrepreneurship center, and they had an incubator, and they had a bunch of different things. And so the gentleman who ran that part of the university and several of the people that worked in various departments would host a morning breakfast meeting. It was, no one was paying for breakfast. It was not catered. There was no agenda. It was just come on, hang out, and talk to people. And I was not necessarily part of the startup ecosystem. So that was one of the ones that I said, great, I'm going to go to this, and I'm going to go every week, and I'm going to be known. Just be shopping to see what ideas, what's going on in the world. Yep. It was networking in its most real sense. I didn't know I was going to be spending a decade in space. As a matter of fact, because in that group of people, the gentleman who was the host of it was a founder and board member of a company called XCore.
You're talking about Stephen Fleming.
I am talking about Stephen Fleming.
I love that guy. Yeah,
I know. And he, that was one piece of a broad portfolio of things that he does. Another of the people that was there was a guy who was working with this crazy bunch of rocket jockeys that were out in the desert somewhere. He was like their business guy. Mm-hmm. That's Michael Mealing.
Yeah. Yep.
And alongside him was an intern that did an intern, Colin Ake.
Colin, right. You guys had quite the ecosystem in that area, right? And that's not and Joe Landon was also there for a bunch of this. Curtis Alada. That was pre-Joe's MBA at Harvard, right?
That was I think it was before he went full time and moved out to do planetary resources and planetary power. But it was before it was. Yep. So anyway, from this group, and it was funny because for what seems like a long time, my cocktail bit was, anytime I'm out at a party, I would tell them about the strangest part of my week was the 15 minutes every Monday morning that I would listen to people talk about space policy and were honestly like engaged in talking about it as if it was a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the conversation would be what's going on in startups and who's out raising and how did the Georgia Tech football team go. That one was usually a shorter bit because we can move on. Some politics, what's going on here and there. So it was a great kind of mixing pot. And then out of that, because I got to know these people, when people have a problem they're trying to think their way through, this is a group of, hey, I'm trying to figure out what to do with this thing, or any of those other sorts of things. And it was from that that one point Colin said, hey, what's a pro forma? And I was like, here, this is what's and he's like, can you send me that? And I'm like, no, but I can build one for you.
Right.
And there you go. So that when I say it was accidental, it really was. Since I had worked a number of other things around, what else was emerging technologies, everything from plasma gasification of municipal waste to non-invasive water meters to reclaimed material for art to there was half a dozen or more different things that I worked on. I had it was now called Wearable Tech. I had a Wearable Tech company that was a little bit early.
I know that feeling.
But so anyway, all of that, and what's really funny is when I would tell the story about all these things that I've tried. I go back to the entrepreneurship class and guest lecture, and I would tell them about, okay, here was the value proposition, here was the thing, and then that failed, and then we did it, and then this fell apart, and then we get to the rocket one, and I've done 3 or 4 of these, and I go, and here's a company I went to work with, and they are making rockets that can land, and it's like, and that one worked. And everyone was like, what? Because it's the craziest, hands down, the craziest of all of them.
Yep.
So yeah, that's how I got into space. And then, it was a hop, skip, and a jump once I attended my first New Space conference. And a lot of the folks, and even before that conference, a lot of the people that I felt connected to were people that were involved in the foundation. So that was kind of a natural.
Yeah. You found your tribe. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, you talked about, several different organizations you were a part of. Some succeeded, some didn't. What are some takeaways? What are some failures? And I use that term failure as a really, I think you only learn if tuition costs, right? Tuition costs time or blood or sweat. And the easiest thing is money, right? It's time, sweat, blood, or money. It costs something. Learning something, tuition costs something. So what would be some wins, some losses? What are lessons from that maybe we don't all have to bleed or pay for?
Yeah. And there have been any number of different ones.
Right.
I'll start off with the how I wound up, for people who look and say, "Oh, I want to be in that sort of job." The idea of plotting out the path to get to the job is not necessarily the highest yield.
Right.
I've had the experience that I had because I have an exceptionally high tolerance for risk. I am amazed that more people don't.
Right.
And one of the things, and this fits into a broader theme of what are the things that we should be doing to improve ourselves, our teams, our industry, our species, being aware of the cognitive biases and things like that, and try to improve how you make decisions. And so if you are risk averse, understand why are you risk averse. I'm not saying you have to be risk seeking. I'm just saying understand what is it that's important to you. I've had some phenomenal people that I would have loved to have joined the team at Maston, but they just were not constitutionally able to handle the uncertainty that came with it.
Right.
And I said, don't go work in a small company. So yeah, that's one of the things overall is have, all those things that can go wrong. You got to be able to kind of like look into the abyss and go, yep, everything can go wrong. I could die. I could be poor and living on the street. But glance down there and then go, all right, but I'm going to keep going because future is what I want to have happen. I'm going to put my energy towards that. There's a lot of people that say, well, it could end badly, so therefore I won't go.
Right.
And if you do that, you never go and never do anything. Right. So that's one of the big ones. I think there is oftentimes, especially in this industry, what I say is don't confuse the bright, shiny future with the gritty reality of today. Because tomorrow is going to be awesome. I may not live through it. And it is really difficult. It's really difficult to read all these other articles and see everyone else is doing great.
Right.
Because you know what? They don't publish the articles about the things that aren't going great.
Right. Yep.
It's not of interest. And so there is a skewing effect. And it's, I think, important for our mental well-being and then also for getting stuff done. Have big ideas, but you got to get stuff done. You have to have that grounding. And if you can't, if you've got one and not the other, make sure you've got a good team to help balance that out.
I use the phrase, catch minnows while you're hunting for whales, right? Yep. Because you got to keep the lights on. Yep.
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 And
that's not an easy thing to do, right? Because sometimes the lights go out no matter how much you do, no matter how hard you work, no matter what effort you're putting into it. Sometimes you're just wrong, or the timing is bad, or the market, or global pandemic, or there's a lot of reasons why things close, right? So, yeah. Okay.
The other one that these aren't. I'm not hitting your failures because I'm now like these are the.
No, we're
more
good.
The core outlook, but revel in the struggle is a phrase of mine. It's similar to it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Right.
And in a world where the events that the cycles that we work on in space are really far apart, right? Like, I still wonder, what did everyone do on the 9 years that satellite was going there? Like that probe was heading out. Like it's gonna take time, and if your enjoyment only comes with a successful thing at one point at the end, you're not going to be happy. You won't be happy in this industry, and frankly, I don't know if you're going to be happy anywhere. I was disheartened to see. The Indian Space Agency, when they had they tried to land on the moon and they crashed. Yeah, right. And it was sad. Wish they would have been successful.
Right. $125 million crater. I watched it live. I was fingers crossed, like, come on, guys, do it.
Of course. Yeah. But the thing that killed me even worse was the tone in that room afterwards. Now, I'm not saying you should be happy that it bombed. But I told the team at Maston, I said, I don't care. I do care if we land or not. But at completion, we're applauding and celebrating regardless.
Right. You've earned it.
Yeah. And it's, I understand the value of, you want these things to actually, you want to do it right. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be your legacy, but you don't control that. So it's a outside of space. They've referred to sometimes, some people refer to these as gravity problems, which doesn't necessarily work when we're in the space world. But I mean, we still have gravity is a thing, and you can be mad about it, but gravity doesn't care if you're mad about it.
Right.
And so being mad at gravity is wasted energy. So similarly, like enjoy the fact that holy crap, that was hard. And we messed that up. And I learned something. And if you can revel in the struggle itself, in that aching and striving to do better,
right,
then you're bringing a positive energy rather than this is toil and terrible. I never know what's the next piece.
Ours is the only industry where a success of 99.75 is still a failure, right? If you look at the Indians, if you look at the Israelis, when they went to the moon, they got within, measurable feet, meters, kilometers of a target that's typically 280,000 kilometers away. I just messed up kilometers, and 345,000 kilometers to the moon. They got within 1,000 kilometers or less both times, and that's still considered a failure, whereas they got 99.7 whatever percent correct, right?
Fewer people have, I don't know this for fact, but it sounds like a good number. I would say fewer people have worked on a lunar landing than have gone to the Olympics.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right. The Olympics, that's the pinnacle. It's the height. And yet we still sometimes we conflate our value as a person with the success of some hardware or software somewhere else. So
the Olympics, that's 10,000 people every 4 years or more, right? That's and it's been going on for generations. So it's easy to say there are more Olympians than there are lunar developers. So anyway, I think that might be changing. So we're about halfway. I want to switch some gears here a little bit. Sure. The foundation got a big boost from the Club for the Future. So talk a little bit about the club from your perspective. From my perspective, I'm a big fan. About 18 months ago, plus or minus, Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin group, and people who watch my shows know that I really try hard to push away from the personalities of space and focus on the companies that are doing the work. Because this isn't the Bezos Musk show. It's a whole lot more than that. But I'm a big fan, and I've got people who've told me that Bezos was very directly involved with the Club for the Future creation and disbursement. So I'm gonna use his name on purpose because I know that he was actively involved with the process. But he made $19 million investments. The Club for the Future made $19 million investments, and then they made one $20 million investment. That's a little less publicized. But let's talk about what it did for you, for the organization. How did you spend it? Like, this show is about money and space, so
it was huge. And to the context of how huge it was, the Space Frontier Foundation has done all sorts of awesome things. One of the things, I'm going to go take half a step back and around to come in and talk about why the impact was so huge. Largely, the organization was fed by people that were in SEDS when they were in school and would become involved.
Students for Exploration and Development of Space, SEDS.org.
Yes. They would, the foundation was a place to come volunteer and become involved in the space community that was welcoming, and would engage and give people a chance to actually get involved, not just stand off to the sides and fetch coffee or something to that effect. So part of that, by its nature, though, means there's a decent amount of turnover. And the organization, as we had focused on commercialization of space and had focused on the New Space Conference as the marquee piece of that, and the New Space Conference had grown to the point where it basically was the thing that the organization could do. There's a bunch of other things we were working on, but that dominated the money and the time. And frankly, we're not really a good organization at like efficiently running conferences. That's not our core competency. And so sometimes you lose money. And if the idea was that was going to be how we were going to raise money to fund the organization, and then you lose it, that becomes a problem. So in my turn, we were trying to dig out of the hole. I seem to find myself in those. I keep jumping in them. I don't know why, but it's kind of fun. So we were working on digging our way out of a hole. We had a great plan. I got to tell you, the missing New Space Conference that was canceled because of the pandemic would have been awesome, but gone. And with that went our chance, at closing up the holes. And so when the grant from Club for the Future arrived, it really came at a time when we were hurting. And it was great because it allowed us, and again, the size of the holes relative to most of the budgets for space stuff was tiny.
Yeah.
But it still was a hole, and took work. So A, that will let us get out of the hole. B, it allowed us to fund a number of different programs that were all connected to that idea of advancing the human settlement of space, and identifying a few key aspects that are kind of at the ecosystem level that are a threat to moving as quickly as we can. And the idea that space is reserved only for the elite, or space is only for certain countries, even as it transitions from nation state to company, that was one of the things we had long identified as an issue. So the idea of inclusivity has long been a tenet of how the organization is run. What this allowed us to do is ramp that up. And so while some people look at it and go, oh, it looks like the Space Frontier Foundation got woke. They're now doing a bunch of DE&I things. And I understand the context in which that might have come across that way. But really what it was is allowed us to talk about the things that we had been doing for a long time to help make sure that we're moving the entire industry forward. And so there's a collaboration that's going on right now that we're funding, doing research in a future photovoltaic technology that has an HBAU here in the U.S., historically Black university, and then different universities all the way around the globe. And the technology part is interesting. What is also really interesting is how these different universities are working across university boundaries and cracking open new opportunity. And if we are going to get to human settlement of space, we need people to be working across the globe.
Nice.
And so we were able to do things like that.
So so the foundation issued a grant to do research?
Yep.
That's new to me. I'm involved, and I didn't know that.
And this is where this is a blessing and a curse. Years ago, in my previous life, I got called into the boss's office. So what's up? It's like, hey, we want you to run Joe's team. And I'm like, I am not nearly as good at doing Joe's job as Joe is. What's the matter with Joe? He's going to go do something else. I'm like, I don't know that stuff. I'm not that good at it. And my boss said, yeah, you're not as good as him, but you know how to promote and tell people the good work that the team is doing. And that's what we need. We need someone to let the other bosses know that this group is actually doing something good. And that's what I'm doing here a bit is I'm doing right now.
This is an outreach tool.
The organization had done some of these phenomenal projects, but their energy had been tied up in the doing of them. And so now we need to make sure we're talking about them more. And their impact on the individuals that are involved is already great. Now what we can do is let other people know about it. There was a DE&I toolkit that we put together. There was continued political advocacy. There was what were some of the other? There was a program we called Lift Her Voice that was focused on female space podcasts. So New Moon Podcast, Ignited Thinkers, and Mission Eve were the three that we had provided financial support so that those podcasts would be able to spread their message a little bit further. And so this is about Club for the Future. These were a couple of the programs that we were able to execute on because we had this donation. We were able to deploy those funds in a way that really helped move the industry forward. It's not just about, oh, what is it for us? It's what are we doing to help remove those things that might impede the eventual human settlement of space. So that was phenomenal. The next pieces then are helping make sure the organization is setting itself up for the future. And I mean, like operating and running, and this is boring stuff. Making sure that the board, that we have a good consistency and board training, and so that we have an organization that will be able to continue to function and have that continuity out into the future. And then some of the promotion as it relates to some of the work that we've done. So what will be happening here in the near future is that we're going to be taking some of these things and kind of spinning them into more public outreach. And then we are also going through this effort to understand what are the biggest gaps right now. And that's one of the things that it's hard. It's easy to see what other people are doing. It's harder to see what people aren't doing.
Right. There's been, the whole idea of vision, mission, values has been a little on the fluffy side, a little underappreciated at the foundation. And just having who are we, where are we going, what are we doing, not just next Tuesday, but for the next 500 Tuesdays, right? Like, right. Like, where are we going as an organization? Your history is as a rabble rouser. That's certainly, y'all made some enemies and a few friends, but some enemies up on Capitol Hill for a long time.
Running an ad that says "Scuttle the Shuttle."
Right.
I mean,
brilliant ad copy, by the way. So hats off to the team who pulled that one together. I know the team who pulled that together. So yeah, congrats.
And that was absolutely necessary because that was the biggest thing at the time. Right. The question is, what's the biggest need
now? Right. That was 20 years ago. How long has the foundation been around? I know 25 years, right?
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting
25 years from now. What's your vision, mission, values for for 25 years from now.
And the piece that we have, the organization has that advancing the human settlement of space focus. Included in that is the, by unleashing the power of free markets. So we've got some of those pieces that are in the credo that are out there. That's the guiding principles. And this is.
Let me just break in for a second. I have a T-shirt over here that I can't get to right now, but it says "Unleashing Humanity from the Tyranny of Gravity." Right, like that's so. Feel free to steal my line and internalize it.
But I'm going to bring another piece, which is by not being first a space guy, I get to bring some other pieces in. And one of them is the efficiency, like having a good organization, a healthy organization. Just because there's people that are settling space doesn't mean they know squat about how to actually plan and organize and run an effective organization. And so when I joined the board in the previous iteration, there were a bunch of things that were best practice that are normal that weren't done. And I don't want to say, oh, I'm an entrepreneur that thinks you should just do what everyone else does. No, I do think as an entrepreneur, you should do the thing that you're different and best at. And then everything else, take whatever is like, you can invent your own type of accounting, but don't. You may be smart enough to do it,
right?
But don't. Use QuickBooks. Shut up. Next, spend your energy on the things that matter.
Right.
And so that's why I said, all right, we need to look at what is best practice. How do we make sure that we have an organization that will be able to run? What's the best practice of a non-for-profit? Do we have, and this is a phenomenal one. Here's a really boring, phenomenal one. D&O insurance. Director and officer insurance. Yep. Why is that so crazy? Because 25 years ago, the foundation and its members were judgment proof. In other words,
they didn't have any assets. Nobody was.
There was nothing to go after. Right. And again, I don't actually know who had what when, but the idea is if this organization is going to continue and wants to be able to recruit people with experience that have made money either in space or somewhere else, you got to have D&O insurance.
Right.
And any sophisticated practitioner or board member, anyone that has been around, that'll be one of the questions. And if there isn't a D&O, like, right. And so that's the sort of stuff that I've been doing with the foundation. It's some of the blocking and tackling.
God, is it important, right? It's foundational.
And it sets you up. It sets the organization up to have the freedom of execution. Because if someone doesn't like something, and then you can cast the entire organization into disarray by saying, oh, well, you didn't follow the bylaws and blah, 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 then you can't actually take risks because you're going to get hit from the flank. So tighten up the flank, don't reinvent the wheel, and then you're kind of off and running. So those are, I know it's boring, but one of my superpowers in this industry in particular is because my life will be fine if I don't work in space. It will be less, but it'll be fine. Mm-hmm. And that gives me a perspective that, some people don't have, because their training, their sense of self is defined as I'm a space person. And that's like, we need those people.
I'm unemployable anywhere else for sure.
I'm not sure I'm employable anywhere, but
right.
But in a negotiation, if you're buying a house and you fall in love with the house and I have to have the house, then they can charge you whatever.
Right.
And so that having a little bit of that outside, I'm not a space purist in that way. But if you doubt for a second that I'm committed, you should hear the history of what we went through at Maston.
Right, and we're going to do that. We're going to do that in good cliffhanger and good segue. Yeah. We are definitely going to get into the Maston story. Let me. We only have a few minutes left, and I have some closing stuff here. Let me reference Daniel Tompkins, Dr. Tompkins. He was in a Center for Space Commerce and Finance business plan competition. I think maybe about a year ago now. He's a pretty fascinating guy. I'll post his LinkedIn bio here in a moment. But he's got some comments regarding. Well, his background is in agriculture. He's an agricultural scientist. He likes growing stuff. I think he refers to himself as a plant doctor in a personal conversation we had once. But he's talking about when you move off Earth and try to become independent of Earth's natural resources. It doesn't matter whether you're going orbital, moon, Mars, Venus, whatever. You've got to have a sustainable and reproducible humans in the loop. It's being worked on in multinationals, government, universities. It's power, it's materials, it's wastewater, it's agriculture. Most is in a post-oil context, which I think is an interesting detail, and it's giant deep tech hidden. That the space settlement sector doesn't even know it's there. So let's talk about, like, if we do fulfill our goals of moving off world, I think one of the holy grails is human reproduction on orbit. I've dedicated a lot of screen time to having babies on orbit, because if you don't have babies, you're just camping. But then Daniel's thing is, how do you feed us? So have you thought about, that far out? How do you manage? Right now we have what? We have, if I got my math right, we have 14 people on orbit today. It might be a little less. I always am a little backwards on China's program, but
way shy of settlement.
Right, way shy. Right,
shy.
We had a program about a year ago where some people were making some pretty daring calculations that we might have 100 people on orbit in just a few years. 2035, we might have as many as 100 people on orbit at one time, simultaneously. I think that's boggling, and I love it. And there's some math that actually shows that might be true, given that there are 5 very well-funded space station organizations. So 100 people on orbit. But how do you feed 100 people on orbit? How do you feed 100 people on the moon? How do you feed 100 people on Mars? Has that ever been part of your calculus, or is that outside the box?
I will answer with more people, and I don't mean in the Soylent Green version. I mean, you need the people to be doing the work. No, that has not been a focus of mine in the Space Frontier Foundation. It is not a thing. So yeah, that's a problem that does need to be solved. I don't think the Space Frontier Foundation is going to be the ones to figure out the solution. What we do need to do, though, is, forgiving the pun, make sure that there's a fertile ground for that to happen. So, like, right now, what are some of the barriers to understanding what's going to be necessary in production? And I'll point one of them, and I wish I could claim that this was all me, but we don't know much about gravity between 0 and 1. Right. Now, there's some companies and some people that are working to solve some of that right now. But when it was articulated in that way, I'm like, oh crap, yeah. Right. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We need to make food. We need to make babies. We need to do a bunch of things. some of that, one of the gates that we will cross is going to be a better understanding about the effects of gravity on our current biology, and understanding how do we need to factor that in. So what are we going to do about it? We're going to ask the question of, what are the organizations that are focused on biology and reproduction in space? Are there groups that are already doing it?
There are.
If there are,
I'm going to recommend that you get I just posted the link for Dr. Tompkins. It's worth chatting with him. I think that's probably worth doing.
Yeah. So
all right.
Those are the sorts of things where I think we don't have to do everything. I want to find the things where it's important, it doesn't have enough attention, and we are well suited to bring a solution to bear. That's where we should be putting our energies.
Say that again. Something that's difficult that you.
That's important. It doesn't have to be difficult. It has to be important.
Okay.
You don't want to waste your time on doing a thing that.
Right. Other people.
What color they paint the rocket? Don't care.
Right.
No offense to any graphics people or whatever. Place where there's a gap in who's covering it. For example, worrying about Earth impacting asteroids. I know the Planetary Society, that's one of their things. Great. Why would we do that? Because they are already doing it and they're way better at it than we are. We'll support. Yay, good. And then the third one is, where can the organization, either because of what we have now or what we can gain, have an impact on that? So, the Space Frontier Foundation is not going to be the funding source for Space Elevator, sorry to say, but if it was something like, something else where it was influencing public policy about space elevators, that might be the sort of thing where the organization could bring its resources to bear. And although not part of the official charter of the organization, one of the things that I love about the Space Frontier Foundation is that it is an organization of individuals, not an organization of companies. We love the companies and we love to work with them and everything else, but we are governed by individuals, not by companies.
Yep.
And that allows us the flexibility to do things that are beyond what companies have the appetite for.
Yeah. Right on. All right, Sean, thank you so much, sir. I'm really looking forward to our next conversation. We'll have that scheduled pretty soon, but it'll be in the next 2 weeks, and we'll talk about lessons learned and kind of what happens next in your ongoing saga. So super excited about that. Yeah,
thanks. And if other people have ideas on what things we should be focused on, jump in the Discord or ping me, whatever. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's definitely do it. All right, and with that, thanks a lot, Sean. We're gonna close off here in a moment. We have 2 great guests that are three great guests kind of lined up right now. We have on next Monday we have gosh, I've lost their name. I've lost the times. All right, so Peter Gerritsen's going to come in about 2 weeks. He's going to be talking space policy. He's got a new book coming out that's going to kind of prominently feature the idea that I talk about a lot, Starship Singularity, but also it's a national defense, U.S. national defense focused book. Pretty darn important. I've got another one of Colonel Gerritsen's books on the shelf behind me. We have Dr. Stephen Cohen, professor out of Canada, out of Montreal. He's going to give us a primer on physics, and I know that this is a space and money focused talk, But I've learned recently that people don't understand that physics determines the business and policy of space. So if we don't have that, we don't have a good handle on, his new book is called Getting Physics. So we're going to have Dr. Cohen come in and give us a 101 lecture on orbits, Leo, Geo, the moon, Mars. There is going to be some talk about elevators and lunar elevators in there. So stick with us for that. Monday, our own team is going to take a look at Space Capital's newest document. We're going to take a deep dive into that thing because that's a super important document I look forward to every quarter. And then who do we have on Monday? We have somebody that I can't think of. Holy cow, now I'm embarrassed. Give me a second. I should have this off the top.
It's a special secret guest. You have to tune in to find out who it is.
It's really good. I'm excited about it, and I can't come up with it. Wow, how embarrassing is that? All right. Well, we do have a guest so on Monday, so come back and join us for that. Gosh darn it, that's really frustrating. Okay. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you. We're doing this every week, twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays. We've got the Mars Society is joining us once a month on Tuesdays. We've got some other clients that are going to be joining our network here pretty soon, so pretty excited about that. And with that, thanks, Sean. Thanks for being a part of this. Thanks for all the work that you've done, because the foundation is such a key organization to this whole ecosystem.
Honored to serve and happy to be here.
Right on. All right. Thanks a lot, Sean. Take care. Bye-bye.